The last time we concluded the description of Krishna's instructions on meditation. But as I pointed out to you, this description of the methods of yoga, which are one yet another darshana of the Vedas, are included for the sake of completeness. Because from the beginning of the Bhagavad-Geeta, 6th chapter, Krishna clearly states that the real yogi, the real sannyasi, is not one who lights no fire and does no work, but one who works as he is obligated without taking shelter of the fruits of his labor. Anashritah karma phalam karya karma karoti yah sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyah. So right in the beginning, he gives you a caveat that yes, I am going to describe the process of meditation. But please note that this is not the preferred, this is not the ideal, this is not my recommended method of God realization. He also points out that Aru Ruksher Muner Yogam Karma Karanam Uchyate Yogarudastasya eva Samaha Karanam Uchyate. That for one who is a beginner in this field of yoga, work is the means, whereas for a person who has attained union with God, for him, meditation is said to be the means. So, having explained this, you will see that at the conclusion of the 6th chapter, Krishna also says that yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam samay yuktatmo mataha. That one who is united with me, Krishna, in intimate faith, he is the highest yogi of all. He is the topmost yogi. He is the supreme yogi. So he has couched this process of yoga or dhyan yoga or meditation between work and devotion, emphasizing at both ends of the chapter, work at the beginning and devotion at the end. And where we concluded last time, Krishna explains in this Dhyan Yoga chapter, text 29, Sarvabhutastam Atmanam Sarvabhutani Chatmani Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma Sarvatra Samadarshana. A yogi observes me in all beings and he sees all beings in me. Indeed, Krishna says that this one who is attained yoga, he sees me everywhere. The 30th verse of the 6th chapter is very important. It says, Yo mam pashyati sarvatra, sarvam chamai pashyati, tasyaham na pranashyami, sa cha me na pranashyati. One who sees me in all beings and who sees all beings in me, I am never lost to him, nor is he ever lost to me. See, the realization of God is seen in three distinct, separate realizations. One is the realization of the all-pervading nature of the Lord, which is Brahman. The second is the realization of the Lord within your heart and in the heart of all living beings, which realization is termed as Paramatma. And the third, which is to see the Lord as Bhagavan, who is the source of both this Paramatma as well as Brahman. It's like the sun is the source of sunshine which enters the room and appears all pervading. And the image of the sun in the mirror is also a reflection of the sun in the sky. So Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, these are the three realizations of God. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagwaniti shabdyate. Typically, when one is perfected in knowledge, one experiences God as Brahman. When one is perfected in Dhyan Yoga, when the yogi is perfected in Dhyan Yoga, he then sees Bhagwan as Paramatma within the heart. And lastly, when he is perfected in Bhakti, he sees the Lord as Bhagavan. So the yogi sees this Paramatma in his own heart and he sees him in the hearts of all beings. And thus, the Lord is never lost to him, nor is he ever lost to the Lord. सर्वभूतस्थितं यो मां भजत्य एकत्वम् आस्थितः सर्वथ वर्तमानोऽपि स yogi मयि वर्तते. He who knows that I, Bhagavan, and the Paramatma, within all creatures are but one, who worships me and remains always with me in all circumstances. So Krishna again emphasizes here in the 31st shloka of the 6th chapter that indeed he, Bhagavan, is one with that Paramatma who is the Lord within your heart. And thus in 32 he says, Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va yadi va dukham sa yogi paramo matah. The perfect yogi, by comparison with his own so-called self, he sees the equality of all beings, both in their happiness and in their distress. He sees them with equal vision. Now Krishna is further explaining. I told you in the beginning he points out that work is the means, and at the end of the 6th chapter he points out that devotion is the means. And in this sandwich where he has placed the Dhyan Yoga, he also, through the words of Arjun, points out that this path is not easy for the ordinary spiritual seeker. So in the 6th chapter, 33rd verse, Arjun first expresses his reluctance to take up this path. As I said, Krishna speaks the Bhagavad-Geeta and includes all the Ashtikya darshanas of the Vedas. And of course, because of that, he has included Dhyan Yoga, which is known as Yoga itself. And it is a practical part of Sankhya Yoga. They usually go together. One is analytical and the other is meditative. So Krishna now is telling you indirectly through Krishna, Arjun, that this path is not easy for you. So Arjun says, this system of yoga which you have described is impractical, unendurable, because my mind is restless and unsteady. Arjuna vacha yoyam yogastoya prokta samyena madhusudana etasyaham na pashyami chanchalatvat stitam stiram. The mind is chanchalatvat, it is not at all stable. How can I possibly take up this path of meditation? And then he says, this is a very interesting and important verse. Chanchalahi mana Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayurivasa duskaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, to control it, seems to me to be more difficult than controlling the wind. Vayurivasa duskaram. It is more difficult than controlling the wind. There are many reasons why the mind is this way. And the mind is this way because the mind has been created for the survival of the individual with his prakriti. And for the individual to survive with his prakriti, the mind creates a sense of self which is known as ahankar. And this ahankar is your autobiographical self. This ahankara is how you think of yourself. This ahankara is all the labels that you have put on yourself. And the nature of the mind is to constantly repair, reconstruct, project, and expand this ahankar. Because this ahankar's job is to help you to survive within the world among other individuals with ahankar. Therefore, the mind, which is a function of the brain, is seen when the brain engages in what we call as the default mode network or the social mode network. When the brain is constantly thinking of I, me, myself, mera kya hoga, mujhe kya milega, and constantly thinking of what shall I do, why did this person say this, why am I feeling hurt? So they're always thinking of self. And that is why the mind moves. And the mind learns from the past. Therefore, the mind is not still. It moves to the past. And because it is worried about what will come in the future, the mind moves to the future. So these are the characteristics of the mind. The mind wants to move into the past. The mind wants to move into the future. It is a time machine. Your mind is a time machine. When it is tamasic, it moves into the past. When it is rajasic, it moves into the future. When it is sattvic, it may remain in the present moment, but still, this mind dwells on I, me, myself. It's ahankar. It also has three diseases of the mind. It wants to enjoy, it wants to control and possess, and it wants to show that it is better than other individuals. Bhoktaram yagna tapasam sarvalok maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam yaj gnatva mam shantim richati. When you learn that the Lord is the only enjoyer, when you learn that the Lord is the only controller and possessor, and when you finally accept that God is equal to all living entities, only then will you know peace. So, this is why the mind is restless. And Krishna is asked by Arjun, and Krishna says to Arjun that indeed it's very difficult to control this restless mind, but you can do so through constant practice and by detachment. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha असंशय महाबाहो मनो दुर्निग्रम चलम अभ्यासेन तु कौन्तेय वैराग्येन च गृह्यते. The Lord said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is very difficult to control the restless mind, but it is possible to do so by constant practice and detachment. For one whose mind is uncontrolled, self realization, God realization is very difficult work. But one whose mind is controlled and who strives by the right means is assured of success. That is my opinion. So Krishna clarifies, he says, you must have practice and detachment. And if you control your mind by the right means, you will be assured of success. He also says, Ayati Shraddhayo Peto Yoga Chalati Manasa Aprapya Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Gatim Krishna Gachati. Now Arjun says, all right, I'm willing to give this a try. But if I give this a try, even if I have full faith in what you are saying, in your assurance that with practice and detachment I will be able to do this, through control of the mind I will be able to attain to divinity. What if I take up this path, but after all I am a prince and I am surrounded by wealth and distractions, worldly pleasures, and now I may take it up with full enthusiasm, but later, tempted by the world and worldly mindedness, I may fall from this path and may not attain perfection in this mystic process of meditation. And then what happens to me? Half here and half there. धोबी का कुत्ता न घर का न घाट का. O Krishna, such a person who has deviated from this path of mysticism, shall I perish like a cloud that leaves the original parent cloud and tries to move to another and then perishes in between? Kachin no bhaya vibhrishtas chinna bhram eva nashyati apratishto mahabhavo vimudo brahmana pati. So I will be neither here nor there if I take to the path and then fall away. Etan me samshayam Krishna chetum arhasya asheshata tvad anya samshayasya chetana upapadyate. This is my doubt, O Krishna. I want you to destroy this doubt. But for yourself, there is no one who can destroy this doubt. So Krishna is encouraging him that don't worry if you're going to give this path up later on, you take it up for now. Doesn't matter what you take up, It will stand you in good stead and will last you lifelong. You have to understand that elsewhere in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna clearly points out that those who perform Vedic sacrifice, right, they go to Swarglok, and thereafter they come back again into this world, having lost everything, having exhausted their pious credits or good karmas. There Krishna says to Arjun that having enjoyed the pious credits of Swarg, you will come back again into this earth, this place of birth and death. But then he points out that ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahami aham. But those who worship me, they don't lose out. Whatever they have gained, they carry it with them in good stead and it remains with them permanently. So here he points out why and how. And he says, Shri Bhagwan Uvacha Partha Naiveha Namutra Vinashastasya Vidyate Nahi Kalyana Krit Kaschid Durgatim Tata Gacchati. Durgatim Tata Gacchati. This is a very beautiful line. One who does good is never overcome by evil. So what happens if you take to this path and after taking to this path of becoming united with the Lord, you fall away, distracted by your old friends and old habits, and worldly activities overtake you and overwhelm you. Krishna points out that when you pass away, you may not directly attain to divinity, but you will attain planets where the pious living entities dwell. And having lived there for many, 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 many hundreds of years, right, you will come back again into a family that is both pious as well as prosperous. Prapya punya kritan lokan ushitva shashvati samaha suchinam shrimatam gehe yoga bhrashta vijayate. Sure enough, he says, you will be reborn in a place where it will be more conducive for you to take up exactly where you left off. Or he says, you will be born in a family of yogis. Athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etadhi labataram loke janma yad idrisham. And you will take your birth in a family of yogis who are surely great in wisdom. And such a birth is very rare within this world. And having taken birth again, you will take up the spiritual life that you left exactly where you left off. And you will make further progress to achieve complete success. Tatratam buddhi samyogam labate parvadehikam yatate cha tato bhuya samasiddhau yog kuru nandana. You will revive the divine consciousness of your previous life and you will make further progress in order to achieve complete success. See, when you move from one body to the other, what really happens is that it's not just the soul that moves, but the soul moves with the subtle body. The subtle body is your mind, intelligence, your ego, your memories. Even if they're not conscious memories, when you move on to the next life, you have unconscious vasanas that are lying dormant within you. These are desires that are dormant, inchoate, unexpressed desires. And when you are born, all your activities of your previous life are carried with you as a bundle of karmas, as a bundle of impressions in your subtle body. And when you are born here, the same habits take over. So if you have been spiritual in your previous life, your prakriti again orients itself for spirituality. And thus, the subtle body prepares the gross body, and the soul then relaunches itself into efforts to reunite with God. पूर्व अभ्यासेन तनैव रियते हि अवसो अपि सः जिज्ञासुरपि योगस्य शब्द ब्रह्म अतिवर्तते. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he becomes attracted to yogic principles even without seeking them. Such an intuitive yogi, striving to be united with God, stands above all the rituals and ritualistic principles of the scriptures. प्रयत्नाद् यतात्मनस्तु योगी संशुद्ध किल्बिष अनेक जन्म संसिद्धस ततो यति param gatim. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor, sincere efforts in making further progress, all his contaminants are washed off, and after many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. Now that you have understood the path of the failed yogi who takes to the path of Dhyan Yoga, I want you to again go and understand the path, which is the path Krishna describes in the 9th chapter. And in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-Geeta, Krishna points out that it doesn't matter who you are and how you are and what you are. By taking shelter of me, you can approach the supreme destination. Mam hi partha vyapashritya tepi syu yo pap yonaya striyo vaishyas tatha shudras tepi yanti paramgatim. Whatever your birth, whatever your gender, whatever your caste, you can approach the supreme destination by taking shelter of Krishna. So it is not so much, it is not so rigorous. The path of devotion is not so rigorous as that path of Dhyan Yoga. And he goes on in 9.33 to say, Kim punar brahmana punya bhakta raj rishyas tatha anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasva mam. So how much easier it will be for the brahmanas, the righteous, the devotees, the saintly kings, who in this temporary and miserable world, in this anityam sukham lokam, they engage in loving service unto me. So you see in the 6th chapter, Krishna tells you that if you are unsuccessful, he will help you in the next life, give you a better, after giving you many years, hundreds of years in a planet where pious people dwell, you again take birth and take up the spiritual activities you had given up exactly where you had left off. And thus you will progress on that path. And then Krishna points out, because now he's coming to the 7th chapter. So the last verse of the previous chapter usually gives an introduction to the next chapter. So now he's beginning those chapters which deal with devotion to God. So while he has begun the 6th chapter by saying that work is the means, at the end he concludes by praising devotion as the cause of being the yogi who is the highest. Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yuktatmo matah. Of all yogis, one who abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, he is most intimately united with me and is the highest of them all. So with this, I conclude the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. If anyone has any queries or questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Shantuji, for today's session. My first question is, what lessons can people take from the concept of the unsuccessful yogi when facing failures in their personal or professional lives?
The lesson that everyone should learn is that whatever you put into devotion towards God, whatever you do towards reunion with God, whatever you do as a seeker of the divine, is permanently with you. You don't lose it at all. So the spiritual merits that you gain, unlike the material merits of good karma, right? They are permanently with you. They are not exhausted in a swarg. They are retained with you birth after birth after birth. And you can always pick up that spiritual path, those spiritual discipline, the spiritual habits, exactly where you left off the last time. So this is a path where there is no loss and there is huge gain. Neha bikramo nashosti pratyavayana vidyate swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayato mahato bhayat. On this path, there is no loss, no diminution. And on this path, little advancement saves you from the greatest fear. What is the greatest fear? The greatest fear is going to hell, to suffering the punishments of Yamaraj. Bhagavad-Geeta kinchita ganga jallava kanika pita sakridapi murari samarcha kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. If you have read Bhagavad-Gita even a little bit, if you have even once in your life said, Krishna, I am yours, if you've taken even a drop of Ganges water and surrender in devotion, you are saved from having to go to have an argument with Yamaraj and going to hell. You'll be saved from that. Bhaja Govindam, Govindam, Bhaja Govindamate.
We live in an age of distraction and material pursuits. Like, we are always constantly running behind one thing or the other. So, how can one stay committed to the yogic path despite setbacks?
You remain by practice and detachment. What practice? The practice of turning your mind to God. I have suggested 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening if you can chant. That's roughly If you chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, 8 hours of the day spent in doing your work, and doing your work in a spirit of devotion to God, remembering God and forgetting self. You won't have much time for anything else. Avoid electronic media that distracts you and seek electronic media that has spiritual texts, spiritual bhajans, and so on. And thus, by turning your mind to God, you will gradually dissolve your sense of self and reduce your suffering. And as you reduce your suffering, you will find peace.
Rightly said, Shantnuji. Thank you so much for today's enlightening session. And to all our viewers, do stay tuned with us as we come back again for another session on the Bhagavad Gita on next Thursday at 8 a.m. Namaste.
Hari Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.